So we've tinted our canvas, we have laid out our main shape in there, and we have started to do what, it sounds a little sophisticated, our value study. It's really just, we're kind of just painting in two colors to get in the lights and the darks, and that's why, for the sake of this demo, I'm using the black and white version of our reference photo, because it just, as you get started, it helps train your eye in a way that maybe you're not used to seeing. So again, the colors that I'm using, the Winsor Newton burnt sienna, this really warm burnt sienna that was kind of this wash on the canvas, and then ultramarine blue to give sort of the darker value. So I'm just going to be working between those two colors, and my eye is just glancing around the boots, looking at some degree of detail, but the detail in this case is simply light and dark. We're just putting that in on our canvas with these two colors. I'm using the burnt sienna, pretty wet and drippy, as kind of a dark, and then as needed, I will darken that further with the ultramarine blue. This is not necessarily the funnest part of this process, and it can be somewhat tedious. But hopefully what you find in doing this is sort of a lot of learning about shape, about value, rather than just sort of studying it out of a textbook. It's a way with paint on canvas and actually making art, to study and experiment with some of these elements, and to hopefully discipline your eye a little bit with some things that in art speak can sound a little technical and intimidating, but don't really need to be. So my eye's just kind of going around the canvas, looking for darker areas, lighter areas, medium dark, and just putting those in as my eye sees it. And if I backed away, looked at this canvas right now, I might be disappointed or embarrassed at what it is or isn't. But this is where you try to not think about it and just let your eye and the brush and your hand work together and work a little magic. And again, you see some of the drips are coming down, and we like those. Those will be part of the, maybe they show up in the end product and maybe they don't, but they're interesting. I've never taken an art class in school. I didn't take any in college. I was introduced to this little simple process, and for me, it was a great jumping off point. I've loved looking at art through the years, loved going to art museums, have tinkered around and made a little bit of art myself, but never really had much focus, and felt intimidated about the idea of, okay, what do I paint? How do I paint it? How do you go from a blank canvas to a finished painting or work of art? And for whatever reason, this clicked for me, and so I just introduced this as one option of something where maybe something clicks in it for you. I would suggest that if you're going to try this as a process, at least for starters, to not try marrying it with other ideas. I do that myself and have changed a lot of things, but I think if you start out with it at its simplest, and play around with that, then you can find over time what works for you, what doesn't, what you might want to change. Like, I mean, you could do this underpainting in, I've done lots of underpaintings in hot pink, and it gives a really cool effect. Part of the reason that this color works is it's sort of a earthy, warm color, and it ends up just being really versatile. And so whether you're doing a landscape or you're doing painting a figure or some cityscape or something, these warm natural tones they end up working really well with just about anything you want to paint. So for better or for worse, this part of the process is really key to the success of your final product, and it probably requires the most sort of discipline. Though I hope what comes across is that this isn't, it's not like this is a lot of effort. I guess I would say it takes some more patience. The more detail you put in at this point, it's sort of like spending more time on the framework of your house. And if you frame it out real well, then the rest of the house is probably going to come together a lot easier. Whereas if you kind of rush through the framing and the foundation, you can end up with something, I would say you're probably going to struggle with the rest of the parts. Hopefully that's a good analogy. All right, so hopefully what we're seeing is the image come together a little bit. And again, the end product that we're going to have is not intended to be photorealistic or anything close to that. So these loose, wet strokes and stuff it's going to be part of how the finished product looks. Which, if you take time to look at any of my paintings, if you don't like the paintings, you probably don't want to use this process. But if you like the idea of painting loose, vibrant, painting representationally, but not worrying so much about getting it just right, then maybe this works for you. All right, so I'll show you at this point, with the paint having not dried totally, we could still, if there was an area in there that we thought, oh wait, I missed that bright spot, or I've kind of painted over a high value, a bright spot, a light spot on there, then typically with a wet rag or wet paper towel, you can still pull away enough paint to sort of recapture that. So even though it's dried some, that is still working. And I'm not trying to get down to bare canvas, so it's not a big deal. Just pulling off enough. And actually at this point, this may seem a little too detaily, but one of the things I really like about the boots is the stitching in there. And I don't want to miss that, and so I'm gonna make sure I at least get it on the canvas a little bit, even though I'm just really roughing it in there, but it's amazing how it still will show up to some degree in the end product. And that stitching, even though this is sort of overly light where I'm following the stitching around, It's fine. I can fix that or not fix it later. But notice that part of the way the stitching is on this boot is part of what really makes the boot a boot. And so we don't want to miss that. Even at the same time, it's you know, we don't want to get out our teeny little brush and paint in some fine, try to paint stitches. That would look silly. But roughing it in like this, it gives you hints of details that are really, I think, more interesting to the eye than if we tried to make it real fine. And like we see how there's a little bit of light on the back of this kind of wrinkle in the boot right here. And I kind of missed that. And maybe I'm pulling off too much paint at that point. But I can always go back in there. We're just continuing on, getting in our lights and darks. I'm not wasting time going between a bunch of different brushes. There's not really any point in doing that. That's part of the simplicity of what we're going for here. If you get stuck at any point, ask yourself, where are some of the darkest darks that I've missed, or where are some of the lightest lights that I've missed? Because sometimes in the middle values, maybe it's a little bit harder to see, but you should always be able to see, okay, here's the darkest part on this, or here's the lightest part. And as you're going along, it's good to sort of reestablish those. But we're coming to a point where we can actually say, or where we can almost say we're done with our little value study, our framing out of the house, and we'll put on some color. One of the things I want to do, at this point I am going to make a decision about kind of the background. So I like some of these shadows coming off. So I want to put those in the painting. And this one, the shadow kind of comes up here. It's not really that dark. The shadow kind of comes up there. And then when I do still life, like this, I like to have a horizon line in there because I like to do a couple different colors. So I mean, it doesn't really matter where I don't like to put it straight. That's not very interesting, and I don't like it to be at a dead center. So for now, I'm just going to establish that as a horizon line, and we'll kind of play with that later. Okay, so at this point, you kind of take a step back and you say, is that good enough? Have I put enough framework on the house? Is there something else I want to do? I could keep going on this and keep going, but I think we're going to say that we have enough detail in there, and the next step will be color.